They said she was too young to understand. But at 6 years old, Ruby Bridges understood something that many adults did not. That courage isn't about strength or size. It's about doing what's right, even when you must do it alone. It was November 14th, 1960, in New Orleans. The morning sun had barely touched the rooftops when a small girl in a white dress, carrying a lunchbox and clutching her mother's hand, stepped into history. Her name was Ruby Bridges. 4 federal marshals surrounded her as she walked quietly through a sea of shouting faces. People screamed, cursed, and waved hateful signs. The air was thick with anger, but Ruby's small feet never stopped moving. She kept her eyes forward. Her mother whispered a prayer with every step. Ruby was born in 1954, the same year the United States Supreme Court declared that segregation in schools was unconstitutional. The case was called Brown versus Board of Education, and it was supposed to end the separation of black and white children in classrooms. But in the Deep South, laws could change faster than hearts. Many schools found ways to delay integration. In Louisiana, officials gave black students impossible entrance exams meant to keep them out. Ruby passed the test. Out of 6 children chosen to integrate New Orleans schools, she was sent alone to William Frost Elementary. Her father feared for her safety. He had seen what mobs could do. He said, "They'll hurt her." But her mother, Lucille, believed this was a moment too important to refuse. She told him softly, "The Lord will protect her. This is for all our children." So that morning, Ruby put on her new dress and shoes and climbed into a government car. She was only 6, but she was about to face a storm that most grown men would never dare to walk into. When they reached the school, hundreds of people were already waiting. The crowd erupted as she stepped out. Women screamed, calling her names no child should ever hear. Men shouted threats. Some carried dolls in coffins to scare her. The marshals formed a wall around her, guiding her quickly through the front doors. Ruby thought the noise outside was like Mardi Gras, but it wasn't celebration. It was hate. Inside, the hallways were silent and empty. Parents stormed in, pulling their children out. By the end of the day, every white student in the building had been withdrawn. Every single one, except Ruby. Only one teacher agreed to stay, a young woman named Barbara Henry, newly arrived from Boston. She was shocked by what she saw, but she stood her ground. When the principal told her she could leave, she said, "If that child is here to learn, I will teach her." And so every day, Ruby sat in a classroom alone with Mrs. Henry. There were no other children. The desks around her stayed empty. Sometimes she could still hear the chants outside. But inside that quiet room, Ruby learned to read, to write, to count, and to dream. Mrs. Henry treated her not as a symbol or a cause, but simply as a little girl who wanted an education. Every morning, the walk was the same. Federal marshals came to the Bridges home and drove her through the angry crowd. Some people threw tomatoes at the car. Some spat at her as she passed. One woman threatened to poison her food, so Ruby brought her own lunch. Her mother walked with her at first, holding her hand, praying aloud. Later, Ruby walked alone, head held high. A psychiatrist named Dr. Robert Coles watched Ruby from a distance for weeks, studying how such a young child endured such cruelty. He expected to see fear or trauma, but Ruby amazed him. One day he saw her lips moving as she walked. When he asked what she was saying, she answered, "I'm praying. I pray for them." She wasn't praying for herself. She was praying for the people shouting at her. She said, because they need help the most. Day after day, she went to that empty classroom. For months, she had no friends to play with, no children to talk to. She could only see Mrs. Henry, who taught her lessons with warmth and patience. At lunch, they would sit together and talk about the world beyond the school walls, about books, about dreams, about hope. Sometimes Ruby drew pictures of smiling children playing together, black and white side by side. She said she believed that one day her school would look like that. Mrs. Henry believed it too. The pressure on the Bridges family was unbearable. Her father lost his job because he refused to pull his daughter out of school. The local grocery store banned them from shopping. Her grandparents were evicted from the farm where they lived. Yet they never asked Ruby to stop. They told her she was doing something far greater than any of them had imagined. Slowly the protests began to fade. The crowds grew smaller. Some white families trickled back. The sight of a small girl walking fearlessly every morning had worn down the rage that filled those streets. By the end of the year, Ruby was no longer alone. Other children returned, and for the first time, laughter filled the hallways again. Ruby Bridges finished her first grade at William Fronst Elementary without missing a single day. Not one. She walked through hate every morning and still came home smiling. Years later, she would look back and say she didn't fully understand what she had done. She said, "I just thought I was going to school." But the world understood. That walk changed America. It showed that even the smallest person can stand tall enough to shake a nation. Ruby grew up quietly. She kept studying, married, raised a family. For years she avoided attention, but history would not forget her. Artists painted her story. Norman Rockwell captured her in the famous painting, The Problem We All Live With. The little girl in a white dress walking past a wall where the word nigger was scrawled. Behind her walked faceless marshals in suits. The painting became a symbol of the civil rights struggle and of innocence standing against hatred. Ruby Bridges did not fight with speeches or violence. She fought with presence, with the courage to walk through a door that others wanted closed forever. When she met her Mrs. Henry again decades later, they embraced and cried. Ruby said she remembered every moment, every lesson, every kind word. Mrs. Henry told her she had taught her more about humanity than any book ever could. In later years, Ruby founded the Ruby Bridges Foundation to promote tolerance and respect among children. She visited schools, telling her story not as a tale of pain, but of purpose. She reminded young people that bravery is born from doing the right thing when it's hard, not when it's easy. She once said, "Racism is a grown-up disease. We must stop using our children to spread it." Those words echo with truth even today. Ruby Bridges' courage was not the loud kind. It didn't come from anger or power. It came from faith, from the quiet belief that goodness can stand in the face of hate and not break. Her small act of defiance became a giant step in the civil rights movement. Because of her, schools across the South could no longer hide behind fear. Because of her, countless other black children could walk through those same doors without needing federal marshals to protect them. Because of her, America took one more step toward the promise written in its own Constitution: liberty and justice for all. Today, if you visit the William Fronst Elementary School, you can still see the stairs where Ruby walked. Tiny footsteps leading into a building that once trembled with hate. Those steps are quiet now, but they carry the weight of a nation's transformation. Ruby Bridges was just 6 years old when she changed history. She didn't fight to be famous. She didn't seek power. She just wanted to learn, to read, to grow. And in doing so, she taught an entire country what courage looks like. And even now, when the world still struggles with division and prejudice, her story whispers the same truth she carried in her heart that day, that faith is stronger than fear, and courage, real courage, can fit in the hands of a child.